Welcome to the Gaia Report. I am Crystal Johnson. I'm a senior environmental and energy planner and climate adaptation strategist. So happy to have you here. Please join me in welcoming a very special guest who does profound impact work, specifically here in Massachusetts. We have Saya Ameli Jahebi. So welcome to the Gaia Report.
Thanks for having me.
Yes. So please tell the audience that what your work is. There are many successes that you've had. We've known each other for at least a year and a half, and we'll get to that. But you're here today to talk about your work with Sunrise Movement. And it's my understanding that you are responsible for or serving on the media team generally, but you also have a specific role for a upcoming global climate strike, September 20th, where you serve as a co-lead on the core team. Mm-hmm. So please tell me about Sunrise Movement and what your work is.
Yeah, so just to share with you the textbook definition.
Please.
The Sunrise Movement is a movement of young people.
Okay, now when you say young people, define that. I know some of us are young in spirit eternally.
Yeah, so it kind of starts at 0 and goes up to 35 years old.
Okay.
And beyond that, we have many adult allies who are absolutely amazing, and we are standing on the shoulders of giants. So we really benefit from having older folks that are helping us out as well.
That's great.
Maybe it's donating or helping us with the carpools if we need to go somewhere for the action. But the leadership and the decision making and the bulk of the movement is youth-led.
And that's quite powerful.
Yeah, and we really stress that to make sure that we're giving young people a voice.
Now, for Sunrise Movement, what is their story? Like, when did they first move forward here in Massachusetts, United States?
So Sunrise kind of began as a way for a group of friends to find hope again.
Okay.
After the 2016 elections, where we were starting to see a lot of environmental bills and a lot of progress rolled back all of a sudden. And it was really discouraging. And to the founders of Sunrise, the way that they got back up and the way that they found hope again in American democracy was creating Sunrise to give young people a voice and push politicians in the right direction so that we can solve the climate crisis.
And one of the things I really value about the impact work that they do, and you mentioned, is that it started from young individuals who were quite frustrated and decided to take a meaningful, structured action, and launched Sunrise Movement, and how it's advanced now, where it is nationwide. Mm-hmm. And the focus is, yes, it's youth-led, and it has some key principles regarding the climate crisis. So what are some of the key principles that you'd like to share?
Well, we're young people from all walks of life. So it doesn't matter if you're from a lower income background. It doesn't matter what the color of your skin is. It doesn't matter who you love. It doesn't matter. It doesn't really, none of these differences that are kind of instilled upon us as things that should be driving us apart. In Sunrise, we put those aside.
And I read something where it says it's not about right or left. And I thought that was really smart. It's a youth-led movement regarding a climate crisis, which is a humanity issue. It's regarding life. It's not necessarily a political issue, even though politics is tied to it and it's limiting it, but it's regarding, do they really understand? So it's around the urgency of the climate crisis and making sure that it's really understood as such and its message as such.
Yeah.
And it seems that they also focus on the fossil fuel executives and politicians and holding them accountable to say what is being done. Not promise, not broken promises, not going in circles, but we're at a critical point now. So I value that. Anything that you'd like what was attractive to you about the messaging that drew you in?
Yeah, I mean, for so long we've been told that it's our fault as individuals and that we should cut parts of our own life and make extra expenses
Yes.
so that we can solve the climate crisis alone.
Right. Right.
But that's not
It's true.
that's not all of the picture. Yes, we do have to absolutely change our
Yes.
lifestyle, but it's not just the average citizen.
Now you said something, and there's so much to talk about, but you said something really special there, is that we have been told, like, yes, we should be sustainable at home, we should be very eco-friendly, but it's ironic because we're being told this, yet the largest entity that has the means to have the profound impact of policy and planning and implementation and inspiration is with, the government. And currently it's not. And it's like, well, what good is it if I'm being eco-friendly and mindful and recycling and reducing my waste and being aware of what I'm buying and packaging if the main entity around it's not being supportive or it's not even referencing climate crisis or minimizing, what's occurring as an environmental issue or a climate issue. So that's a very good point. I've heard some people start to talk about that, and it's frustrating because we make efforts at home, but it's not going to account for anything.
Exactly. And part of why we're so motivated to push our politicians is because we're seeing a lot of fossil fuel money flow into politics. And money can corrupt anything.
And it has.
Exactly.
and
Mitch McConnell, for example, has taken millions and millions of dollars from the fossil fuel industry, and that may have contributed to the fact that he was a really strong opposer of the Green New Deal.
Totally. It has. I mean, from current even to the past, to remind people in the audience that it's on records. There's documentation how the fossil fuel industry clearly knew about what would happen if we continued down using fossil fuels from the 70s, and how working with the political system at the time hid information. And now here we are in this situation, and then still having the political leaders be funded by them and supported by them at the expense of not just all of us now, but particularly the next generation.
Exactly. And to just kind of bring this back around to one of the biggest actions that Sunrise started with and gained a lot of momentum with, and that was the No Fossil Fuel Money Pledge. This was way before the Green New Deal. This was kind of as Sunrise was just starting to take off.
Okay.
But we realized that we should not be waiting for change. And if there is something that our politicians should be doing and they're not, we're going to make that happen. We're going to take matters into our own hands. So Sunrisers sat down and they wrote down this no fossil fuel money pledge for politicians to sign. And from then on, any politician who has run for office and is looking for our endorsement, or is looking for the endorsement of young people, or is looking to show that they really are going to fight for our future and not take money from fossil fuels, has signed that pledge.
Oh, that's outstanding.
Yeah.
So then, for Sunrisers, developed, as we had mentioned, a few years ago in response. Now, since that time, there's been a nice convergence of so many things that have led to, like, the last year and a half of youth-led movements where they're in the forefront. Not to say that they weren't there before, but having the Sunrise, we'd mentioned, what has started, in Europe with Fridays for Futures, with the young Swedish activist, Greta, that's been, recognized for all of her work and leadership, to you were mentioning then with what was happening here with the new Green Deal. So can you talk about all of that and what that leads to where we're at now with Sunrise Movement?
Absolutely. Okay. So on November 24th last year, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez just proposed this amazing bipartisan resolution, the Green New Deal.
Yes.
And this was perfectly in line with a lot of the Sunrise values. We want to unite the two issues of inequality, economic inequality, racial inequality, with the climate crisis, because the impacts that are going to hurt us the most
Right.
are mostly focused on those communities of color, on
Yes.
those poor communities.
Yes.
And they are the least equipped to deal with the consequences
Right.
that arise from having your entire community destroyed by,
Right.
for example, a hurricane.
Yes.
And so when she proposed that, and we've been working on it kind of over time as well with Sunrisers and with other organizations to kind of polish up this vision
Right.
of a new America, we just kind of took off. So
I can imagine.
yeah, the on November 24th, that day, over 100 Sunrisers were there sitting in at Nancy Pelosi's office.
Okay.
And
Wow.
Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez came in kind of with the Sunrisers, and it was just a really amazing, positive atmosphere. And back then, the Green New Deal really was a dream that was too good to be true. We only had 5 or so co-sponsors for the Green New Deal, and not many people knew about it yet.
Right.
But less than a month later,
Okay.
Sunrise came back with, this time, over 1,000 youth
Oh, wow.
to march on Washington, D.C.
Yes.
This is on December 10th.
Okay.
And again, we sat in at 3 different offices. Over 100 people got arrested for
wow.
sitting in at those offices and refusing to move.
Mm.
And I just overnight, our support kind of went from just a couple to over 40.
Right.
We kept pushing, and a couple months later,
Yes.
we ended up with over 190 co-sponsors.
Right.
We just kept building that support.
Right.
And I remember I was sitting in this van driving back from Washington, D.C. I'm cramming on my math homework because I have school the next day. And we're just kind of like
That's so
checking our
great.
phones for the news that's coming out
Right.
of this action
Right.
that we just went
Right.
to. And we're seeing representative after representative sign on to co-sponsor the Green New
That's
Deal.
wonderful.
So a lot of it is just showing support
Right.
and making sure that our politicians see that.
And having that presence there, and that the youth are driving that, and in a very structured, smart, manner that has big impact. Now, before we get into what you're focused on now with Sunrise Movement, I just want to share with the audience just a little bit about who you are. Because one thing that I had noticed that with the Sunrise Movement website, it mentioned that we share stories, or you share stories. And so I want to hear about your story. Like, who are you? Because some people may think, and especially other young people say, like, oh, they didn't know, like, do they have to be a hardcore activist? Or they may say, weren't aware of it. It seems like there's a place for every youth who recognizes there's an environmental crisis, and that their future, meaning their livelihood of air, food, water, the economy, everything is tied to the health of our climate. So everyone should be aware. And so how did you get involved? Because you right now are a senior at Brooklyn High School.
Yeah.
And so what was the steps that happened for you? So please tell us, who are you?
Man, I think my journey began a pretty long time ago. So my family's from Iran.
Okay.
And there's this holiday after the New Year, which we celebrate in the spring.
Okay.
Where 13 days after the beginning of the year,
Okay.
you're supposed to go out, spend some time in nature, and clean up.
Okay.
So what my mom and my brother and I used to do is go hike in the hills behind our house.
Okay.
And pick up plastic bottles on that day. And I remember one time we went up this super dusty mountain with like just getting kicked up in our eyes and blinking it out and trying to keep going. And of course, my brother and I complaining because we're in first grade, and my brother's 3 years younger than me, so even more complaining on that end. But we're coming back down, and I see this plastic bottle across kind of a bunch of pebbles on the trail, and
Right.
and I want to go over and pick it up. So I go and bend down, and as I'm grabbing it, I slipped on the rocks.
Okay.
I fell down and I hit my hand on the ground, and I got this huge cut on my hand. And it really hurt. And so we were just kind of climbing down again. My hand's bleeding now, so we're holding it with a napkin and trying to get to the car as fast as we can. But then we see this couple walking up the trail as well, and they just stopped for a second and they're like, "What are you guys doing?" And my mom said, "Well, we're cleaning up the trail and we're picking up plastic bottles." And they were like, "Oh, that's interesting.
Right.
I didn't know people really did that."
Right.
Or I guess it didn't really occur to them. And so we're like, "Okay, cool, we're gonna rush to the hospital now." So we went down the mountain, and that was that. But you know, a couple months later, we come back and we kind of hiked this trail pretty regularly,
Right.
and we started to see other people picking up trash as well as time went along. So it was kind of an interesting moment where it really occurred to me that people can change their behavior if they see other folks doing it as well. And you know, Tehran was extremely polluted. It's one of the most polluted cities in the world. And so the sky I grew up with was pretty much always gray.
Oh, wow.
And so seeing the contrast with stepping off the plane here
Right.
at Logan Airport, looking up and seeing the beautiful blue Boston sky, again, I realized, wow, things can be different.
Right.
So when I was able to join the Environmental Action Club at my high school and see that young people could really go out in the world and change things, we can take our demands to the State House and expect to be heard.
Right.
We arguably have even more power than adults in some cases because we have the most to lose.
Yes.
And so kind of with the realization of how much young people have power,
Right.
I kind of lost this fear that we all have surrounding the climate change, because we look out and we see all these horrific statistics.
Yes.
We look out and we
can be very
see
overwhelming.
California on fire. We
Right.
see Hurricane Dorian and more hurricanes getting more and more extreme, all these communities in ruins.
Yes.
And it's so easy to get caught up with that. And it's so easy to get caught up feeling afraid.
Right.
And when I found Sunrise, that wasn't a problem anymore, because I could put my fear aside and say, I'm going to do something, and I'm going to do something about it, and that's going to happen right now. So
that's a beautiful journey. And I do want to also add that we met a year and a half ago at the annual Brookline Youth Climate Adaptation Challenge. It's the third annual one, and you presented a great science project regarding the growth of mushrooms, and it was a brilliant, complex project that you had, and you earned a citation, which is a very special award recognition from the Massachusetts State House of Representatives, signed at the time from the state rep Frank Smizik, who's a great environmental climate activist, political leader, and you got recognized in there for your contribution to climate adaptation planning, for your forward-thinking project. And so it must have been, you'd mentioned that then you could walk into the State House now with your role with Sunrise Movement and be like, it all comes together. And you play a significant role as a leader, as a critical creative thinker. You understand sustainable solutions. And it's really great to have you here and have your presence and know that you are taking charge and playing a pivotal role in representing youth leadership and inspiring others, just like you did on that mountain walk where they said, what are you doing? And you reference it, and then it ripples out. And now the work that you're doing also is gathering a lot of momentum, because one of the things that is coming up with the Sunrise Movement is a global strike. And there's a Boston global strike event happening on Friday, September 20th. Please share with us all the information you can for the audience about where, what, and so forth.
Okay, so the strike is going to be on September 20th. That is next Friday. And it's going to be the biggest strike that we have had in the history of Boston.
And one thing I do want to add is that we had participated, my son Aspen and I, in the ones that were held. There was one in March and May. They're very structured, very organized, and I have to commend you for that. And it is truly youth-led. And as someone who's been an activist for decades, probably longer than you've been alive, and I arrived, and there were other adults there, you know, parents. Aspen was very young, and we were like, we actually had tears in our eyes. We were so proud of the youth taking the lead, and we said, well, for once we could say, I'm going to stand over there. Rather than, and you guys had it. It was organized, and the diverse youth that came. There was urban, there was suburban, it was white, black, Hispanic, Asian, it was mixed. You had people's signs, you had young people, kids there with their parents and older high schoolers. And it actually made me feel like we are at a turning point, because I've never seen youth. People talk about the 60s and the 70s with the whole changes that came around with young people in the 20s and college age, and that create huge momentum and shift, but never at a young age of particularly under 20, really leading a movement. And that was, that's critical, that's essential. And to observe that was quite powerful. So yes, Friday, September 20th at the Boston City Hall Plaza, starting at 11:30. What can people who participate or come, what can they expect? Please walk us through the format.
So, well, first off, be prepared for a lot of people.
Yes, it's going to be a huge success. We were just talking here that there's some universities where they anticipate school will be canceled,
Yes.
classes, students will be there. College students, high school students, middle school students. Just to let you know, like Pierce, all the schools are having climate strikes at their school. They are coordinating and walking out. And then separately, some kids will be leaving and will be coming in to be part of the one that you're organizing. So you're really having a huge ripple out effect with more than you can ever imagine. So thank you. But it will be a very structured, organized event, because I've witnessed that. And I just want to highlight that for people who come. It will be massive.
We've worked really hard this summer to make that happen.
Nice.
So we're going to have a speaker stage where
That's great.
hired a whole sound system.
Yes.
And we're going to have young people, old people,
Right.
people of all backgrounds kind of uniting under this common goal of fighting climate change and
Right.
making sure that our government can
That's the
see
key part,
that.
yes.
And
To take action.
Absolutely.
Right.
And it's going to be very interactive. So we're
Right.
going to have tons and tons of songs to teach everyone.
Oh, that's great.
Tons of chants for everyone to join in on. And then we're going to take a march. So we're starting at the plaza, but then we're going to go to the Massachusetts State House.
Okay.
Again, to take our demands up close and personal
That's
with
great.
our representatives and
Okay.
our politicians. And then we're going to go inside for some really, really concrete actions specifically for Charlie Baker
Yes.
and Robert DeLeo.
Oh, that's wonderful. And when you say specific actions, you have requests.
Yes.
Good for you.
We want a Massachusetts Green New Deal.
Nice.
And that is not currently written out.
Right.
It's not. There's kind of separate bills floating around that
Yes.
are amazing, but
Right.
not united under the Green New Deal.
Right.
And so that's what we're looking for, and
Right.
that's what we want.
And
And
to be
so
coordinated, yes.
absolutely.
aligned.
And we need those two key politicians, our governor and the Speaker of the House,
Yes.
Robert DeLeo,
Okay.
to be on the same page with us. They have historically ignored young people. The last time that I was at the State House for a different Sunrise Action, the first Sunrise Action I went to actually, Speaker DeLeo refused to sign the No Fossil Fuel Money Pledge. And he kind of watered down this bill that was going to get us to 100% renewable energy in Massachusetts by 2050 to 2,100.
Oh, wow.
So
I wasn't aware of that.
yeah, and that's also when I learned that he had been taking over $40,000 from fossil fuels to fund his campaign. So again, conflict of interest,
Yes.
perhaps, and we want to call that out.
Right,
So
and you should.
yeah.
So then Friday, September 20th at Boston City Hall Plaza. And while at 11:30, the Global Climate Strike starts, where there are speakers. Before that, people can get there because they're going to have, it's organized, it seems like there's going to be resources there for people to learn from, or tables.
Yes.
So there'll be, a great place to convene beforehand. And then afterwards, I think at 1:30, what time is the march start towards the State House?
It's going to be around an hour or so after.
Okay.
Because we need to kind of make sure that everyone can walk over safely.
Okay,
and
together. All right.
we have a lot of marshals to kind of help direct
Okay.
people.
So we'll highlight 11:30 Boston City Hall Plaza for the Global Climate Strike led by Sunrise Movement in Boston. That's exciting. Now, for what is your next steps, like after you have this? Still planning a series of different climate actions for the month of September. What are some of the goals? I can imagine that it's constantly expanding and growing based on responses that you get on that day. So it's not a wait and see, but how are you approaching, how you plan? So if someone's like, wow, what are they involved in? What would you say?
Well, there's always stuff coming up. So the week after the strike is going to be a week of action.
That's what I heard. So what does that mean?
It's going to be literally tons and tons of different actions
here in
coordinated.
Massachusetts? Or
yeah, in Massachusetts.
Okay.
That are going to be kind of centered around climate action.
Okay.
For example, we have a climate impacts team in the Sunrise Boston branch, and they're going to be coordinating something to kind of bring people together and really look at these communities that have been utterly devastated by climate change.
Right.
And we usually try to keep the momentum going.
Right.
For example, after the Green New Deal tour, we had a whole bunch of mass trainings for 500 people.
Wow.
Each in different areas of the country. We had one in Detroit, we had one just last weekend in Rhode Island, and this is to build more leaders.
Yes.
To build more young leaders to lead more Sunrise hubs. We've gone from 5 or so hubs to over 300 in just a year or so, actually. I was about to say a couple years.
It's been a short amount of time. The growth, which is reflection on the value and the need, and the structure is very intelligent, and it's sound, and it's valid, and people recognize that, so they respond, they come. I want to thank you so much for being here representing Sunrise Movement Boston. For the audience, at the end of this, we will have the website for Sunrise Movement, as well as any other contact information for you to find out more information. Again, Friday, September 20th is the Global Climate Strike here in Boston at Boston City Plaza Hall at 11:30. Please join Sunrise Movement. And Saya, I want to thank you. So on behalf of Mother Nature, thank you for everything that you do. Please keep doing it. Your leadership is needed. You inspire so many people. You've inspired so many people here to get out, take action, to have the youth listening to participate. If you are a mother, an aunt, a grandparent, please make sure that your youth has been educated about Sunrise Movement. Again, it is for all, and it's regarding the climate crisis, because it's recognized that we have approximately 11 years, maybe a little bit more, to address climate change effectively before it's irreversible. And that is regarding uninhabitable, irreversible. So it's quite urgent. And that's the point behind Sunrise Movement, is there is a climate crisis and we have to address it, and address it now.
Yep. Our planet is on fire and we got to do something about it.
Thank you so much for everything that you do. And thank you for the Gaia Report. Enjoy.